Are you ready to connect with nature in a whole new way? Welcome to The Green Scene, your guide to a greener, healthier world. Join Green Corridors Andiswet Dlamini, Duncan Pritchard and Charlene Versveld to explore the wonders of nature and find out how we can live more sustainably and take small actions at home and work to make a big impact.
It's good to be back in studio with Duncan and Charlene. Hello, team. Hello.
How's it, Susan?
Let's look at some easy, practical ways on how to make the world a better place, how to save the world environmentally, what I want to do this year, red bin, yellow bin, black bin. Duncan, this is your thing. Tell us more about it.
I just want to interject. Okay, it is Duncan's thing. Okay, so I have this whole list of things that we should be doing: plastic bags and this recycling this and whatever. And Duncan just tells me, no, that's just clutter. Everyone talks about how you need to recycle. We just banging the same drum all the time. And Duncan says to me, we've got to get back to nature. So I'm going to hand over to you, Duncan.
Yeah, I think it is a bit about getting back to nature, but it's also about human nature. You know, we've been telling people to do this stuff for not centuries, but for decades, and it's not working. You know, like I'm an environmentalist, as an example. And like climate change, you should fly economy. But if somebody gave me money to fly first class or business class, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. You know, and I think people have pushed back against
the first class.
I would take the first class.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a brutal reality, you know. But there's also these things like if you go to a particular prominent grocery store and you get forced to pay 15 Rand for a plastic bag, you're doing the environmentally friendly thing, but then it's filled up with everything that's packaged in plastic, and that just turns people off and turns people away. And I think people don't change because we tell them to do something. You know, there's that famous Baba Dayodum quote: we only conserve what we love, we only love what we understand, and we only understand what we're taught. You know, so I think we need to go back to basics and make it personal. And I think there's a lot that we can do that benefits our own lives and has a personal benefit for us, but also has a benefit for the environment.
Okay, so you basically saying, you know, like we need to, get back to nature, and then we need to make the things that we do second nature. So if we go back to, for example, when, you know, we used to have, what do they used to call the plastic bags on the fences in South Africa? What were they? The flowers of Africa or something?
What?
South Africa.
Like what decade was this?
Maybe before you were born, Susan. Yeah, I've been around a long time. Okay, so before we had to buy plastic bags, they were given out free, and there were a lot of plastic bags that ended up just all over the countryside. And when they brought in the legislation that you had to now purchase your plastic bags, that has dropped considerably. So now people are used to taking their own bags to shops now. They don't, because they don't get them free anymore. Some places still do that. But so we've changed that behavior, you know. Yeah. So how is it, why is it so hard for us to do the right thing?
Because we still fill that bag that you take to the shops with plastic. And I think most people can see the irony of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we don't want to preach to the converted. We want people who've not thought about these things to actually start doing it. So like I get resentful when I take my own plastic bag to the shop and I fill it up with other things of plastic, and then I feel all depressed and it's what am I doing?
Danke, can I stop here? I don't understand. Do you say we fill it up with plastic? I mean, everything that we buy is wrapped, obviously, in
plastic. Exactly.
So if I go buy my favorite milkshake or milk products, and am I supposed to be bringing my own cup now to the shop? Like, really? But break it down for me.
That's my exact point, and I think that's why we're not seeing the change that we want to see in the environment, because people see the irony of that. Okay, I'm going to the shops, being all environmentally friendly at my own plastic bag, but the reality is you're filling it up with other forms of plastic. And I think the challenge is that the environment and the ecosystem and our place in that ecosystem and society is so remarkably complex that no matter what you think you're doing good, there's going to be a negative impact, or you're part of that system. I was telling Charlene, I watched this BBC series about this guy that goes and visits people who have basically taken themselves out of society. And there was a young girl who had moved out into the mountains of Norway. And she would go once a week to the nearest city, and she would collect from the trash. And, you know, supermarkets throw out stuff that apparently if there's just like, you've got a box of tomatoes and something spilt on it, the whole load gets thrown out. So she'd go and forage in trash and find really good food. And it was fascinating to watch. And she lived off this. It was really cool. But I'm getting to my point. My point here is when she starts talking about why she does it, she talks about how wasteful we are as a society, how wasteful we are, and we've got to stop this consumerism and all of these things. And I fully agree with her. But she is a direct beneficiary of that wastefulness. For me, that's just an example of how complex these things are. So when we try to solve these problems, we try to solve very complex problems with simple solutions. And so I think we need to get it back to something that's personal and makes a difference to us and improves our own lives and our own livelihoods, because I think humans are intrinsically, so we want to survive. So, and I think that's where it can kind of start, rather than being like proselytizing and telling people, this is the way.
Yeah, it feels like everything is just so cluttered, you know what I mean? And I know exactly what, sometimes I feel like a bit of an imposter, I'm recycling everything, but there's a lot of stuff to be recycled, do I really need to do all of this? So how do we get back to connecting with nature?
Cool. So I think it needs to be, when we're thinking about these goals and things we can do in the new year to be more environmentally friendly, I think we need to personalize it, you know, and yes, we tell people to get back into nature, but if it's in the context of your mental health, for instance, we know the benefits, that's well documented, or walk on the beach. There's something personal for you there that you actually can experience. And I think bringing these things into, something that gives you and your family a personal goal to achieve that has a benefit for the environment as a knock-on effect, I think for the average Joe Boggs is a lot more effective way of actually framing it.
Talking about average Joe, this will always be my debate. I always feel people in the city are more wasteful than people in the rural areas because we like convenience. It's not about is it working for nature because you're not near nature. City people are more wasteful than people living in rural area because they have more, which means they're willing to spend more for convenience. But if in the rural area, you don't have accessibility of going to the shop 10 times in a week. You go to the shop once a month, buy everything that you need. Everything is in bulk. And like city, you buy little by little as you need it. So I think my answer to this is to start living simple. Don't do convenience, Instead of buying milk 5 times a week, buy 2 liters of milk instead of 1 liter of milk, and use what you need. Don't purchase what you don't need. All of those small things, which I feel we should be doing as city people. That's my view in things.
Yeah, I think that side of it, but then I think it's also the reconnecting back, and a lot of us don't live in spaces where there are gardens or that kind of stuff, but there are plenty of environments that we can go into within a city space to actually just connect and to start to learn. I think that's also one of the things that is quite interesting, is that if you start to learn about things, when you start to name things, you know what I mean? So you start to being able to identify things. It just, it helps your interest and certainly with children, the curiosity. And I was talking about the Zulu word for a kite, the bird, the month of August, and then the Natal paintbrush. Is it the Natal paintbrush which comes out in August?
The Scadoxus.
Yeah, that one, the beautiful big orange. Those all three apparently have the Zulu word, it connects all of those, meaning sort of August, And so when you start to kind of connect things up like that, I'm sure there are a lot of traditional things, traditional medicine, what plants are used for what animals do, what kinds of things. We can be more curious about our environment and then reconnect back.
I used to have a thing when I was learning, like a tree a week and a bird a week. You hear a bird call and you just get to know it and learn it, So, and make that one of your goals is learning, just learning about the complexity of the world we live in.
Yeah.
Whether it's reading a book about the environment or economics, but just understanding the complexity of our world. And I do believe that's why we don't solve a lot of our global problems, because it is a remarkably complex system. But if we get back to, Susan's point about wastefulness, if we turn that into a personal goal, like I want to be more efficient and save money so we can go on a family holiday. With that comes thinking about how you're buying your groceries, where you're buying them. Let's not get fast food. Let's not each take a car in the morning to do something. We can share the car. And, so those little things. So when you can turn something like that into a personal goal that has a personal benefit for you, there's an environmental benefit out of that as well.
Yeah,
I think that's more
it's
meaningful
the,
for people.
You know, if you look after the environment, for me, you can save some money. I mean, for the average Durbaner. But also, you know, an average person also, we have bigger problems, you know, than going to recycle and all of those things. I mean, that's the average Joe who'd say, I have bigger problems right now. I mean, how do we resolve that? You know, if we could find ways to link it to financial benefits with saving the environment, would probably work better, like they do in other countries.
Well, but there is a financial benefit to being more efficient. You know, if you can just find one thing in your home that you do in an inefficient way, you know, I mean, I'm very guilty of this because we can never decide what we want for supper till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then off we go to the shops, and every day it's the same thing. And you're coming home with damn plastic bag filled up with plastic that makes me grumpy every time. But it's a very inefficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
Buy in bulk.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. And we talk about this stuff. My wife and I have spoken about this at length, and we never do it. And this year we're going to do it.
So my big thing, okay, I drink an incredible amount of tea. Like a lot of tea, and the kettle's going on the whole time. And my husband's got this little this thing that kind of measures what usage, and the kettle's like the most used, even more than the washing machine, you know. So my thing would be, for example, is to have the hot pot, boil the kettle once, and then use the pot. I mean, that would be a highly efficient way of, but then I've got to get the hot pot out. And, you know, it's kind of like putting things into place that make it more convenient.
And it's got to be convenient for you as well, you know, and I think we need to find ways to make being environmentally friendly as convenient as getting a takeaway. You know, and it's when a lot of the stuff becomes inconvenient for people. But those little examples you use there, those are simple things that actually make your life more efficient. It saves you money, and it's really convenient. And you probably get your cup of tea in half the time because you don't have to boil the kettle. It's there ready for you. You know, so it's adding these little things to your life. We're not trying to solve all these big problems all at once. And, you know, and I think with that does come a little bit of, I've seen it a lot. And I think it's something that certainly environmentalists should take to heart, is we can be seen as a little bit of holier than thou because we're not eating beef. So, you know, I'm great. But I sit there and think, you know, but your avocado is probably imported from Mexico. you know, so it's all of these things where you've got all of these complexities, and it's, you know, just do the little things that are good for you and can make your life better. And then I think out of that comes the benefits will come naturally, because the reality is it's not people who are passionate about recycling and people who are passionate about saving water who need to do something different. It's the people who have got really busy lives and a lot of stress and doing all sorts of other things. How do we make being environmentally conscious more valuable to those people?
Yeah. I think also one of the other things is just getting out, you know what I mean? So I spend a good 8 hours on my bottom working on a computer, you know, and I try and exercise every single day. And when you're able to get out and actually just appreciate nature around you, it helps you mentally, it helps you physically as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's another way to reconnect.
And that's a fantastic example, because if you took, you know, New Year's, everybody's buying gym memberships, you took the cost of that and just spend that to, you know, if you travel half an hour north or south of Durban, you've got some of the most spectacular coastline and beaches, you know, arguably on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, spend that money going to do your exercise on the beach. It's good for the environment. It's good for your mind. It's, you know, so it's those little things. Just find ways that you can do these things in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. So, Duncan, you're saying I shouldn't bother recycling. I shouldn't bother doing all those small things that you've been preaching about.
No, I'm not saying don't. But what I am saying is don't preach about it to other people who have got bigger things to worry about in their lives, because that message will not land nicely. And I do believe this is a problem with the environmental movement. We preach to other people to recycle and do all these things.
Yeah.
And you might be the world's greatest recycler, but you've got a 3-liter V8 engine in your car, and so for climate change, you're an absolute disaster. You know, we've all got no matter the good you do, the complexity of the system we live in, there's always a downside to it as well. So I'm not saying recycling is brilliant. Saving water is brilliant. If you can do these things, do them. Trying to manage your carbon footprint, absolutely. But don't preach it and expect other people to magically change their lives to do that, because that's not the reality of the world we live in. And what we do need for, you know, sustainable growth and the long-term health of our planet is not a small group of environmentalists to be doing these things. We need it to be mainstream.
Yeah.
And for it to be mainstream, it needs to add value to somebody's life.
So in other words, connecting back to nature, we do feel better in nature. Now, with our green corridors in Nanda Wilderness Park, there's some great stuff happening there in terms of connecting kids and elderly.
And physical health, so that's,
And
tell us about that.
That's where we see the elderly being in the parks, connecting within our park program there that we have in wilderness parks. But for them, it's more fitness and mental wellness. And
they're growing vegetables as well.
They're growing the vegetables as much as they get to take them home as well. But it's also teaching them how to live healthy and they're probably appreciating life more than we do. They have more to explore than we do in the city. That's really the issue, that when you live in the city, you're not really as exposed to these things.
And I think that's my exact point. We've got the wilderness park with the elderly folks coming to do Zumba. From an environmental perspective, that's being outdoors, it's being in wilderness, it's growing your own food. So we could preach all of those environmental messages, but they wouldn't land as well as some elderly folks. Let's deal with your physical health and go do some Zumba. Let's help your family save some money and grow some vegetables. So it's the way we frame it and do it that makes it more personally meaningful to an individual. So I think a lot of it's about
personal. You spoke about personal. You keep on saying personal. How do I make it personal to an old lady living in Glenwood who's in her flat living on the 3rd floor, and all she does, the most exciting thing she does, is her grocery bag in one hand and she walks to the local supermarkets. But how do I make it personal for her of getting in touch in nature?
There are parks everywhere.
There are parks everywhere. She can on her way there, she can look at the birds on the side of the road. And I think the context of this is also really important. I zoom up and down to the shops every day as well, and I've got no connection to nature in that process, but on the weekend, I will make a point of spending time on the beach. If I've got to go do for instance, some planning, I've got to plan a project or do something, I prefer to take my little notebook and go down to the beach and do it there, because I feel better when I come back. I'm getting time out of the office. I'm in the sun. I feel more inspired. So, there's a benefit to actually taking time and doing those things in a different way. And that connects me to nature. So if you think about health and fitness, we all talk about going to the gym and doing weights and doing cardio, but you can do that in a far more
joining the local jogging club. And
you can do those things in a more meaningful way. You talked about how we shop and how we buy things, the efficiency of that. But you have that conversation in the context of, I can save money by doing it this way. And by saving money by doing it this way, I can invest in my child's education. I can go on a dream holiday at the end of the year, whatever that goal is. But there's an environmental benefit coming out of those things. So I think what I'm saying is, when you're thinking about these ways that you can be more environmentally friendly, find ways where they can actually benefit you and your family in a personal way, because then it will have longevity.
The other thing I think is harnessing the curiosity of children. I think, there's a lot to be done in terms of making children aware of the world. I was on a walk the other day in the Palmeet Nature Reserve, and there was a young guy walking with me, and there were a few of us. We'd gone to look for wildflowers. And of course, we knew nothing about wildflowers, but he kept on taking out his Google image. And it was fascinating because he gave us, real-time information about this plant is used for this medicinal purpose. And do you know that this flower only has one leaf, And so this young man was getting so excited about the information, curious information. It was feeding that side of him. So he became quite invested in what. Now, can you imagine saying, you're taking an 18, 19-year-old on a walk to look for wildflowers, This young man was very interested because of the tech, So that's one way to kind of pull people in. I find it fascinating. For example, I've got a book called Game Ranger in Your Backpack, and it's got a whole section there on plants and trees, and every section has a thing around what it's used for for medicinal purposes or for food or whatever, and pretty much everything. It can be used for something, and I think that is fascinating. If you kind of go, that tree there has solved this tummy problem for centuries in KZN, why aren't we harnessing this sort of thing? So I think there's so much to learn, and the curiosity, certainly that's one way to connect in, because then you got respect for it. You see it as not just as a sort of bland landscape, but everything has a purpose and has some meaning.
And that's definitely where it starts, is that curiosity and that understanding. Because I think a lot of our messaging as environmentalists out there, it gets lost because people don't actually understand. You know, I work in climate change. They always talk about this 450 parts per billion of carbon in the atmosphere. Means nothing to people. You know, and that's
It still doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. You know,
What is he going on about?
and I think that's where find ways where you can make nature and make being environmentally friendly just more meaningful to you.
Yeah.
You know, don't try to change the world. Don't tell other people how to behave. That stuff never works. Just focus on what can you do, what can you learn, how can you get more connected to nature. And all the other things, as an individual, then all the other things have these little ripple effects and they start spurning off and people will see you as an example. They'll be, oh, why are you doing that? And then they'll get on board. And I think that's the most effective way of actually getting that done.
Interesting. So, guys, what's the first step? I mean, how do we kind of start getting active in this, trying to save the world personally?
Making it. I think the word mindfulness kind of sums it up. So, if we are mindful about everything that we do, the way that we interact with the world, if we ask ourselves a question, do I want this or do I need it? You know, when I go and I see a nice shirt in a shop and I go, oh, I really like that shirt. I go, do I need it or do I want it? And invariably, it's probably, I want it, you know. So that's a really good place to start. You know, do I need or do I want? And the mindfulness about everything that we do.
Yeah, I think it's also just about like looking after yourself and being the best person you can be. Because I think that's where it starts. Avoid trying to preach to other people and, you know, forced behavior change just simply doesn't work. So I think it's a lot about, you know, focusing in on yourself. Be a good example to your children. Be a good example in your community, you know, and don't beat yourself up if you're not the most environmentally friendly person, because the world is a complex place. And I can guarantee you, no matter what you do that is environmentally friendly, somewhere along the line, there's probably going to be something associated with that that's not environmentally friendly. You know, so it's just about being the best person you can be and respect nature, learn about it, get this curiosity. Everything comes from that.
On that note, do the little that you can do this year. That's the wrap, everyone, from me. Guys, thanks for that chat.
Cheers. See you next time.
Cool, thanks, Susan. We'll see you guys next time.
The Green Scene podcast is a partnership between East Coast Radio and Green Corridors. Find out more about Green Corridors via durbangreencorridor.co.za.